Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Happy to see you. If this is your first time, really appreciate it if you could like and subscribe and comment and share. That'd be great. Right, as I mentioned in my first video, which is an introduction to the channel, in this video, the first actual video, I will be talking about apartheid in South Africa and the MAGA movement in America and the similarities between them. Now, as you can see, I have a photograph here of a beach in Cape Town, where I'm from, and it says a white area, the Divisional Council of the Cape, white area, by order secretary. Die afdelingsraad van die Kaap, blanke gebied, oplas secretaris. Excuse me. That was not a very uncommon sign back in the day. So this is a whites only beach, or was a whites only beach, and these signs were sort of up all over the country, really. All sorts of areas in South Africa back in those days, parks, beaches, rivers, just just about everywhere really was out of bounds unless you were white. Quite a travesty, actually. So I came across in my research some AI generated definitions of apartheid on Google, 2 pages. So now I have to say that 2 pages to cover 50 years of atrocities at first felt a little bit cheap to me. Felt like I wasn't really doing justice to the topic. But this topic today is really just about the comparisons between apartheid and the MAGA movement, not so much about the history of apartheid, because many books have been written on it, and there were a lot of atrocities. And so I just wanted to say that from the outset that 2 pages, yeah, it does feel a little bit sort of a little bit slim. Um, but these 2 pages do break down apartheid pretty well. It's just a few bullet points, but good for the comparison with MAGA. So the first one is apartheid was a system of legalized racial segregation that oppressed and dominated one racial group over another. It was in place in South Africa and Southwest Africa, now known as Namibia, from 1948 until the early 1990s. So in South Africa, things started to change around about 1990, 91, thereabouts. 1994 was our very first free and fair elections. The term apartheid comes from the Afrikaner word apartheid, which comes from the French word mettre apart, meaning separating or setting apart. So again, believe it was 1974, this separation, the Separate Areas Act came into being, um, which was a law which separated people, right? Some examples of apartheid policies include classifying citizens into 4 racial groups: black, Indian, colored, which are non-whites, and white. I should also just say that colored is kind of sort of like a mixed race, although they are a race of their own, unto their own. The Cape Colored, which is a race that is sort of over a couple of centuries, I would say, came into being from sort of just a mix of Malay, Indian, uh, different black tribes of Southern Africa, um, different white uh, sections, English, Dutch, French, and they are unto themselves their own race. It's not so much a mixed race as what we might in the West here think of as mixed race, where you might have a black mom and a white dad, or vice versa. Um, this is more defined, and they're very proud, and yeah, they're great. And white, all right. Making it illegal for South African citizens to pursue interracial relations, prohibiting mixed marriages, restricting movement, and prohibiting access to certain public spaces. Well, certain public spaces was most public spaces. The international community has adopted the term apartheid to condemn and criminalize similar systems and practices around the world. For example, Amnesty International has called Israel's treatment of Palestinians apartheid. I I need to look into that more. I push back a little bit on that. In Israel, and now this video is not about Israel and what's currently going on there. I'm totally against Netanyahu's policies at the moment, and but that's a different topic. But just for the sake of this video, 5 million white people lived in apartheid South Africa, and 45 million people of color lived in apartheid South Africa. 45 million people of color didn't get to vote when elections came around. 5 million white people did. Now, in Israel, even at this current moment in time, in their parliament, the Knesset, they have the Palestinian people have representation and are allowed to vote. If you live in Israel, if you are an Israeli citizen, whether you identify as Jewish or secular Jew, Orthodox Jew, Arabic, you get to vote and you do have representation in parliament. That was not the case in South Africa during apartheid. So yeah, maybe that's another good topic to look at. If anybody watching this wants to jump in and email me, the email address is above, and if you have any views on that, and maybe I can get you on the channel, and maybe we can chat about it, I'd be happy to do that. All right, the second page was apartheid was a system of racial segregation and white supremacy in South Africa that lasted from 1948 to 1994. So I was around about like sort of 21 years old when apartheid came to an end. My life and relationship with apartheid is sort of through the height in the 80s to the decline in the early 90s, whereas MAGA, we've seen the rise of this sort of white supremacy, if you want to call it that, which is a slightly different. So, but we'll get to MAGA in a minute. Origins. The history of apartheid can be traced back to the 17th century when Dutch settlers began to exploit black South Africans. In 1863, slavery was abolished, but white-owned mining companies continued to exploit black workers. Implementation in 1948, the National Party, an all-white political party, won the elections and implemented apartheid. The party promised white voters that apartheid would lead to better jobs, and they used force to keep the laws in place. Used force. System. Apartheid laws classified people into 4 racial groups: black, Indian, colored, and white. People of different races were required to live in separate areas, use separate public facilities, and had limited contact with each other. Afrikaans, the language of Dutch settlers, which is effectively African Dutch, became the official language. Resistance. Apartheid was met with violent internal protests, international sanctions, and economic struggles. Nelson Mandela, founder of the ANC's military wing, which was known as Imkhonto weSizwe, which means the spear of the nation, was imprisoned from 1963 to 1990. His imprisonment drew international attention and support for the anti-apartheid cause. And the end of apartheid ended in the early 1990s, leading to the formation of a democratic government in 1994. And Nelson Mandela was our first president, ANC president back then. So that's a very, very summarized, brief history of apartheid. I mean, like I said earlier, lots of atrocities happened, terrible things, terrible things. And then maybe that's another topic for another video, the history of apartheid. But I want to make the comparison now with MAGA and interestingly some other countries on the fringes. Right, so Make America Great Again, MAGA, is an American political slogan and political movement most recently popularized by Donald Trump during his successful presidential campaigns in 2016 and 2024. Again, I'm still shaking my head that he won last month. Boggles my mind. MAGA is also used to refer to Trump's political base or to an individual or group of individuals from within the space. The slogan became a pop culture phenomenon, seeing widespread use and spawning numerous variants in the arts, entertainment, and politics. Now, back in the day in South Africa during apartheid, the arts, entertainment wasn't really a thing. I mean, like theater didn't really exist in those days. There was some like sort of minute fringe stuff, but like yeah, the apartheid government had censored everything by that point. I mean, even newspapers like was censored. Um, Everything was just music was censored. Everything was censored. But that was sort of, like I said, in the height and towards the decline of. This is now the rise of MAGA, right? So this is how they use um, the arts and entertainment to get across their message. Uh, been used by both supporters and opponents of Trump's presidency. Originally used by Ronald Reagan as a campaign slogan in his 1980 presidential campaign, Let's Make America Great Again, it has since been described as a loaded phrase. Multiple scholars, journalists, and commentators have called the slogan racist, regarding it as a dog whistle, as dog whistle politics and coded language, which I agree. I believe that is the case. Um, the phrase was also used in speeches by Bill Clinton during his 1992 presidential campaign. President Clinton also used the phrase in a radio commercial aired for his wife Hillary Clinton's 2008 presidential primary campaign. During the 2016 electoral campaign, in which Hillary Clinton opposed Trump, President Clinton suggested that Trump's version, used as a campaign rallying cry, was a message to the white Southerners that Trump was promising to, and I quote, give you an give you an economy you had 50 years ago, and move you back up on the social totem pole and other people down. Very, very interesting. Again, there makes a similarity between the maybe not just race, but like the economic class that you might be in. So maybe not ostracized because of the color of your skin, but ostracized because of your wealth or lack of, right? Very similar. Uh, the MAGA movement, often referred to simply as MAGA or Make America Great Again, was founded on the belief that the United States was once a great country but has lost the status owing to foreign influence, both within its borders via immigration and multiculturalism, and without via globalization or the increased integration of multiple national economies. MAGA members think that this fall from grace can be reversed through America First policies, and America First policies are apartheid policies, basically, pretty much the same thing, that would provide a greater degree of economic protectionism, greatly reduce immigration, particularly from developing countries, and encourage or enforce what MAGA members consider to be traditional American values. Some MAGA supported policies, such as Trump's call in 2015 for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States, would involve egregious racial or religious discrimination. Some of the policies eventually adopted by the Trump administration did entail such discriminatory treatment of non-white immigrants. See below. Um, Again, very interesting. In addition to its political stances, the MAGA movement is known for its particularly combative character, which exemplifies the extreme partisanship of contemporary American politics. In keeping with that stance, controversial rhetoric has flourished within the movement, including messages that that critics see as homophobic, sexist, or racist, or as inciting violence. Um, yes, all very, very similar to apartheid South Africa. The MAGA movement is also known for having an antagonistic relationship with mainstream news media, which are thought by a majority in the movement to be biased against MAGA views at best and to be lying on behalf of the movement's enemies at worst. This belief has resulted in a vulnerability among MAGA members to false news stories and particularly far-fetched conspiracy theories circulated by MAGA supporting media outlets and repeated by MAGA leaders. Examples include charges that Democratic former President Barack Obama is not native born U.S. citizen, which is now known as birtherism. The Democrats' immigration policies aim to replace white Americans with non-white immigrants, now known as replacement theory, or I think the Great Replacement Theory, isn't that? Do they call it that now? Um, that the 2020 presidential election was stolen from Trump by Democrats through massive voter fraud and a load of nonsense, and that the January 6, 2021 attack on the US Capitol, in which a mob of Trump supporters attempted to halt Congress certification of Democrats, Joe Biden's victory in the 2020 presidential election was actually staged by left-wing forces. Right, so you can now see uh, similarities between apartheid and MAGA. So apartheid, the nationalist government of South Africa back then was very, very anti-LGBTQ plus, very homophobic. It was um, it was sexist. It was certainly racist, of course, and there was a lot of violence. There was a lot of violence that went on, you know, under cover of darkness. I can talk about those sorts of activities in another video. It definitely was happening. Right. One thing that wasn't really mentioned in A, the apartheid section, or B, in the MAGA section was, and this is something that I sort of started to notice probably around about just after the insurrection on January the 6th in 2021, and that is Christian nationalism. All right. I started to put two and two together. In fact, I think it's one of the defining factors in this video in the comparison between the two, even though it hasn't been mentioned in the documentation thus far. But I, for this video, did some research, of course, and I searched white Christian nationalism, and the very first thing that popped up in front of me was that a page on Wiki. Now, I'm not Wiki is not the sort of most reliable thing, but I think for the purpose of this video, we can assume it's okay. Um, there it is, South Africa and the United States, white Christian nationalism, and there's some other countries involved here that I'll talk about. Brazil, Canada, interestingly, Finland, Ghana, Hungary. We all know what's happening in Hungary right now. Very interestingly, Russia. Um, and I'd also like to mention or talk about in a minute about Russia and its current relationship with the current South African government, who are not Christian nationalists. They fought the Christian nationalists. It's a very, very strange scenario. But before I get there, let's just talk about white Christian nationalism in South Africa. So the future leader of the National Party and Apartheid, Prime Minister of South Africa, B.J. Vorster, in 1942 declared, so he became the leader in 1948, right? So he declared in 1942, while the Second World War was still raging, and South Africa, by the way, even though we were allied to the British and fought for democracy effectively, there was an underground movement within the South African government called the OB, or Ossewa Brandwag, which stands for the Oxwagon Fire Watch, which was a Nazi supporting faction. Um, he declared in 1942, we stand for Christian nationalism, which is an ally of National Socialism. You can call this anti-democratic principle dictatorship if you wish, In Italy, it is called fascism. In Germany, National Socialism. And in South Africa, Christian nationalism. Wow. While the National Party was primarily concerned about the nationalist interest of Afrikaners, there was a strong influence to Calvinist interpretations of Christianity as the bedrock of the state. Moreover, by advancing ideas of Christian nationalism, the National Party could incorporate other nations in their program of racial hierarchies and segregation. The Dutch Reformed Church, or the NG Kerk, stands for Nie Gereformeerde Kerk, the New Reformed Church or Dutch Reformed Church in South Africa, provided much of the theological and moral justification for apartheid on the basis of racial hierarchy. Now, we know in America at this moment in time, especially from Protestant sides of Christianity, Baptist, Southern Baptist, there's some crazy, what the New Independent Baptist, there's some real far right crazy Baptist denominations in the States at the moment that are all advocating for Donald Trump and MAGA. Right, so United States, American ideology. Christian nationalism asserts that the United States is a country founded by and for Christians. Now, this is not, no, I'm not an American, of course, but this I know is not true. It's not in the Constitution, and there is a definite separation of church and state in America. Always has been, always should be, but this is the fight, unfortunately, that people are fighting at the moment. Um, and by Christians. Christian nationalists in the United States advocate a fusion of identitarian Christian identity and cultural conservatism with American civic belonging. It has been noted to bear overlap with Christian fundamentalism, white supremacy, the Seven Mountain Mandate movement, and dominionism. Um, Recently about the Seven Mountain Mandate movement. I think it's got something to do with the Project 2025. I'll look into that further. And dominionism, all right. Most researchers have described Christian nationalism as authoritarian and boundary enforcing, but recent research has focused on how libertarian small government ideology and neoliberal political economics have become part of the American Christian political identity. Christian nationalism also overlaps with, but is distinct from, theonomy, which, with it being more populist in character. Theocratic Christians seek to have the Bible inform national laws and have religious leaders in positions of government, while in America, Christian nationalists view the country's founding documents as divinely inspired and supernaturally revealed to Christian men to preference Christianity and are willing to elect impious heads of state if they support right-wing causes. Christian nationalism supports the presence of Christian symbols in the public square and state patronage for the practice and display of religion, such as Christmas as a national holiday, school prayer, singing God Bless America, the exhibition of nativity scenes during Christmas, and the Christian cross on Good Friday. Christian nationalism draws political support from the broader Christian right, but not exclusively, given the broad support for observing Christmas as a national holiday in many countries. All right, so obviously, the UK, we observe Christmas, but we're certainly not a Christian nationalist country, that's for sure. During the Cold War, church attendance reached a high point in the 1950s, which was also when, that's very interesting. Remember that the Cold War, right, against Russia, the Soviet Union, just keep that in mind. During the Cold War, church attendance reached the 1950s, which was also when the United States added phrases like under God in the Pledge of Allegiance and on currency described at the time as a civil religion that was motivated in part to show distance from communism. Christian nationalism also influenced the Constitution of the Confederacy, which mentioned God overtly in contrast with the US Constitution. There you go. Christian nationalism has been linked to prejudice towards minority groups. Christian nationalism has been loosely defined as a belief that celebrates and uh, privilege the sacred history, liberty, and rightful rule of white conservatives. Christian nationalism prioritizes an ethno-cultural, ethno-religious, and ethno-nationalist framing around fear of the other, in this case, immigrants, LGBTQ, anybody who's not a white Christian nationalist, in other words, those being immigrants, racial and sexual minorities. Studies have associated Christian nationalism with xenophobia, homophobia, misogyny, political tolerance of racists, opposition to interracial unions, support for gun rights. I can't read that. Pronatalism, sorry, and restricting the civil rights of those who fail to conform to traditional ideals of whiteness, citizenship, and Protestantism. The Christian nationalist belief system includes elements of patriarchy, white supremacy, nativism, and heteronormativity. It has been associated with a conquest narrative, pre-millennials apocalypticism, and of frequent rhetoric of blood, specifically of blood sacrifice to an angry God. American Christian nationalism is based on a worldview that America is superior to other countries and that such superiority is divinely established. It posts that only Christians are true Americans. Christian nationalism also bears overlap with the American militia movement, the 1992 Ruby Ridge standoff, and the 1993 Waco siege served as a catalyst for the growth of militia activity among Christian nationalists. Christian nationalists believe that the US is meant to be a Christian nation and that it was founded as a Christian nation and want to take back the US for God. Excuse me 1 second. Christian nationalists feel that their values and religion are threatened and marginalized, and fear their freedom to preach their moral values will no longer be dominant at best or outlawed at worst. Experimental research found that support of Christian nationalism increased when Christian Americans were told of their demographic decline. And it is believed now that atheism in the States is 21%, which is larger than any other denomination in the States, which I find. I'm an atheist, always have been. And again, this channel is not it's not about, this is a pro-democracy channel. This is not an atheist versus theist channel. And if you are a person of faith, but you are pro-democracy, you're welcome here. This is not the place for that fight. Unfortunately, though, for Christians, your religion has been hijacked by these extremists. Right, let me carry on. Their decline. Studies have shown Christian nationalists to exhibit higher levels of anger, depression, anxiety, and emotional distress. It has been theorized that Christian nationalists fear that they are not living up to God's expectations and fear the wrath and punishment of not creating the country desired by God. Their God, in particular. Right, the attitudes towards science. Actually, at this point, I'm going to say, I think for my next video, I'm going to deal with a few things. Conspiracy theories and how they interact or don't interact with science. Something called the horseshoe theory of politics, which some political scientists don't agree with, some do. It's an interesting topic. I'm also going to talk about a concept called the Overton window, which is also known as the window of discourse, and then probably also cult mentality and propaganda, and how all of these things play into each other and play into this rise of Christian nationalism uh, in the States and other countries. All right, let's continue. Attitudes towards science. Adherence to Christian nationalism has been associated with high levels of distrust of science, especially parts that are perceived as challenging biblical authority. During the COVID-2019 pandemic, Christian nationalists frequently opposed measures including lockdowns, restrictions on social gatherings, and mask wearing. And a lot of that was to do with conspiracy theories as well, especially the mask wearing. And if you know anything about the States, you've probably heard of Marjorie Taylor Greene, some other crazy, Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, who totally went to war against masks, and the woke movement. Anyway, different topic. Uh, in a 2020 study, it was found that even after um, uh, accounting for socio-demographic, religious, and political characteristics, Christian nationalism was a leading predictor that individuals prioritize the economy and deprioritize the vulnerable due to a persuasive ideology that blends Christian identity with conceptions of economic prosperity and individual liberty. Christian nationalism has also been associated with belief in conspiracy theories. There we go. Um, I'm looking forward to talking about that in a different video. Analysis of Christian nationalists in America found that Christian nationalism is the strongest predictor that Americans fail to affirm factually correct answers. When asked about Christianity's place in American founding documents, policies, and court decisions, those that, sorry, just at that point, I'm just going to quickly mention the current iteration of the US Supreme Court, which is a 6-3 Christian nationalist to Democratic at the moment. That's how it stands at the moment. And probably with Trump coming in, he's going to replace some of those six, and it's going to be like that for a long, long time. And there is a Supreme Court that has capitulated and become corrupt like you've never seen, apart from maybe the Supreme Court in Russia or something to that effect. Uh, yes, so I'll continue. Those that embraced Christian nationalism had more confident, incorrect answers, while those that rejected it had more confident, correct answers. A 2021 research article theorized that, like conservative Christians that incorrectly answered science questions that are religiously contested, Christian nationalism inclines individuals to affirm factually incorrect views about religion in American political history, likely through their exposure to certain disseminators of such misinformation. And I'll put in disinformation as well. There is a difference. Misinformation is more sort of like said by mistake, whereas disinformation is said on purpose to mislead, but also through their allegiance to a particular political cultural narrative they wish to privilege. And then just quickly, let's talk about um, support for political violence, because it seems wherever this Christian nationalist faction seems to rear its head, there is political violence. It's amazing. This religion of peace, love. Apparently, Jesus gave his life for our sins, and we should all love thy neighbor. Support for political violence. Christian nationalism has been linked towards support for political violence. Such support is conditioned by support for conspiratorial information sources, white identity, perceived victimhood, and support for the QAnon movement. Wow. A 2021 survey of 11,000 US adults found that respondents who combined Christian nationalism with these factors, exhibited increased support for political violence. On October 12, 2024, during the Jewish holy day of Yom Kippur, tens of thousands of people attended a rally at the National Mall in Washington, D.C. It was sponsored by Jennifer Donnelly, a marketing professional, and Lou Engle and other Dominist pro-Trump members of the New Apostolic Reformation movement. That's interesting. When was that? I didn't hear about that. In October, eh? I do keep my eye. I watch a lot of American stuff every single day. I don't remember hearing about this particular movement. Engel is described by the Southern Poverty Law Center as an anti-LGBTQ plus extremist. A newsletter mentioned the Lord's authority over the election process and our nation's leadership, and flyers promoted a meeting by Turning Point USA Faith. So we all know Charlie Kirk runs Turning Point, the youth movement of MAGA, effectively. So I think for the MAGA and apartheid regimes, I'm going to leave it there. I think that we've made enough of a similarity between the two. I think the two are very, very, very closely entwined. It's amazing how it falls and declines in one area, and 30 years later, it's rising somewhere else. It's rising in the middle of the free world, actually, which is even more alarming to me. But I just want to quickly mention Russia. Russia and South Africa currently have a very good relationship. Back in the apartheid era, Russia and South Africa did not have a relationship at all. I mean, Russia was Soviet communist and South Africa was nationalist, effectively Nazi. And the reason for that also is that the Soviet Union during the apartheid era sponsored and supported the ANC training camps in Mozambique and Zimbabwe, I believe. And funded them. So there was definitely no love lost between the two. But South Africa and Russia are currently part of the BRICS coalition. Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, BRICS, and there's many more countries that have since joined. It's just kept its original acronym. And they have that relationship, but it does, to me, feel like the current South African government is basically in bed with the enemy. Um, they got out of bed with the enemy in 1994 and then jumped back in the bed with the enemy in in the last few years with Russia, because President of Russia, Vladimir Putin, has been described as a global leader of the Christian nationalist and Christian right movements. This guy's an atheist, trust me. He doesn't believe in any God. It's just a way to control people. There's absolutely nothing Christian about Vladimir Putin, and he's got his guys, Kirill and others of the Orthodox Church to do his bidding. It's like Constantine in the 4th, 5th century AD, when he made Christianity. Before that, it was a cult, and then turned it into a religion as all religions are used to control people, right? As President Putin has increased the power of the Russian Orthodox Church and proclaimed his staunch belief in Eastern Orthodoxy, it's a load of nonsense. I'm going to try not to swear on this channel because at some point I want it to become monetized, but it's difficult sometimes. As well as maintaining close contacts with patriarchs of Moscow and Aurus, Alexei II, and Kirill. Yes, and these guys are like running the KGB as well, or the FSB as it's now known. The Russian imperial movement is a prominent neo-Nazi Christian nationalist group. And again, why did Russia invade Ukraine? Because it claimed that Ukraine was a ultra-nationalist neo-Nazi country, and something to do with the Azov battalion, I mean, all democracies have got like some element of neo-Nazi white supremacy going on. That's just what democracy is. Everybody's allowed to have their own point of view, right? Um, um, I mean, if you think of the Wagner Group, right? Prigozhin, now gone. Uh, that wasn't even formed by Prigozhin. It was formed by another bloke. I can't remember his name now, but like the guy is like covered in iron crosses and swastikas, tattoos. He died in the same plane crash as Prigozhin, and the group, the Wagner Group, is named after the German guy with the moustache. Remember him? His favorite composer, Wagner, right? So, I mean, and here's South Africa, a democratic country that came out of a fascist regime, is now in bed with Russia. It just boggles my mind. Boggles my mind. Um, sorry, let's go back. The Russian imperial movement is a prominent neo-Nazi Christian nationalist group that trains militants all over Europe and has recruited thousands of fighters for its paramilitary group, the Imperial Legion, which is participating in the invasion of Ukraine. The group also works with the Atomwaffen division in order to network with and recruit extremists from the United States. Right, folks. I think, I mean, we can quickly just mention. I'm surprised that France and Italy haven't got a mention here, but Brazil gets a mention. Uh, Also, anti-LGBTQ. Canada has a little fringe party that's also very far right, Christian nationalist. Finland as well. Ghana, interestingly, Christian nationalists seek to uphold what they see as traditional markers of Ghanaian identity, including Christianity, social conservatism, and antagonism to progressive Western ideas such as LGBTQ plus equality. Hungary, well, we definitely so Christian nationalism seems to have started there a long time ago, um, like 100 years ago, and of course Viktor Orban has now picked up the baton and carried on from where that regime left off. Russia, we've spoken about. Scotland also interestingly has a rise. Also anti-LGBTQ plus, aren't they all? Um, there you go. All right, so that's going to do it for this video. Really appreciate it if you could like and subscribe and comment. If you are interested in being a mod for this channel, please email me at the address above. I'm looking for mods. I want to do live shows, maybe have live talks, discuss these topics, these issues, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Thank you very much, and take care. Look after yourselves. Fight the good fight.